Hi guys, let's begin the session for today. Just to introduce myself, I'm Sriniketan here, and I'll be taking the third session of Webtember. And today we'll be mainly dealing with setting up, like learning JavaScript, learning like basics of React, and then we'll start building our own React web page, which will eventually become your portfolio website. So I hope I'm audible. If so, someone can just confirm.
Yes, you're audible.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we have a good participant count here. So with this, let's start the workshop. So I have sent a link in the chat, which basically contains the documentation for today's session, and we'll be mostly following along with that. So if at all at any point you get stuck, you can either refer to the documentation or you can just drop a message in the chat, and we will answer your queries. Give me a second. All right. Okay, let's begin. So before we actually move on to today's workshop, I'll just quickly recap the previous workshop. So last session was taken by Asta, and we had covered topics such as the basics of HTML, CSS, and also how Tailwind CSS works and how the class logic works. So she had also given a brief introduction to React from the previous session. And don't worry, in case you have, if in case you're confused by it or you have forgotten some of the details, we'll again be covering the basics of React in this session as well. So with this, let's begin um, today's today's workshop. Just one moment. All right. So in the previous workshops, you have learned HTML and CSS, right? So today we'll be introducing another language called JavaScript. You might have heard of it quite often. So it's a very versatile programming language, all right? So what it means is it has scope in both front end and back end development. And in this case, we are using it for front end. So what the meaning of what I just said is that we'll be basically using JavaScript, which is a programming language, to add functionality to our websites, as in the stuff that the user actually deals with. So let's say, for example, the user clicks a button. If you take this very GitHub website, you can see there's the outline button here. So when I click on it, as you can see, this menu on the right side just opens and closes. So this kind of functionality can be very easily implemented with JavaScript, and that is the whole point of it. So for this JavaScript part, I would like you guys to follow along, and I will show you how you can quickly set up a very simple HTML file where you can an HTML file, JavaScript file, where you can write your JavaScript code, and how you can also execute it in your web browser so that you can see your results as you do it. So let's get started with that. We have some theory to learn with JavaScript. So I'll brief through it, and you can always look these up online. Like there are proper tutorials, and just keep in mind that learning a language cannot be done in a day. So it's all right if you feel that you're stuck, or if it feels like it's too confusing. You should just try to take your time, and you prioritize on learning the correct thing rather than rushing it. And at any point of time, you can always ask us if you have any queries, and we'll be like ready to answer you. So what I'll be covering today is the very basics of the JavaScript programming language, and you can use these basics to also work with React. So React is just to recap, React is a library which is made with JavaScript, and this library can be used to make a very fancy or like very responsive UIs, and like it basically makes your life easier. In fact, if you see this GitHub website, it is also made with React.js. So I have a special extension in my web browser, and that shows if a web page is made with React or not. And he said, as you can see, GitHub itself uses React, and it just shows how like popular it is in the industry. All right. So we will move on to React later, and we'll just start with JavaScript. So first things first, there's variables. And actually, before I start, can you guys give a raise of hand for whoever has used or like programmed in like any programming language before? Let it be C, Java, or Python, or even JavaScript. That's great in that case. Okay, we have quite a few people here. What about the others? Have you guys used any programming language at all in the past? Okay, that's a good start. So I will be explaining the basics to you. And again, if you have any doubts, just ask. Okay. All right. So first things first, code is basically something that runs on your system, right? And when you write code, you're telling the computer to do something. And the nature about code is that your computer does exactly what you say, and it's unlike a human, where it cannot understand any hidden meaning or stuff like that. So you have to be very, explicit with your code, and you should be very clear with your intention. That's why we need to learn programming languages with a proper structure. Okay. The first concept is called variables, where basically you can think of it as a container which can store a value, or you can store any complex value. So let's say you want to store your name in a variable, then there is a specific syntax in JavaScript with which you can do it. And then once you store your name in the variable, or let's say you store your age in a variable, you can use this variable, and then you can do other calculations or mathematics or arithmetic with it. So there is a statement. This is the JavaScript statement. It starts with the word let, is used to declare the variables. You can also define a special type of a variable called a constant. So it's spelled out like this, const. And when you create a constant, the idea is that once you store a value in this constant, you cannot modify it later on. Okay. So let's actually try out this code, right? So I don't want you guys to just listen. It will be great if you can also do it side by side. So let's let's open a VS Code window, and then we'll start coding it. Okay. So what you guys can do is just open uh, in your desktop, perhaps just make a folder called let me just try it. I'll create a new folder, and let's just say JavaScript practice. Okay. Oh, where is the folder? Right, it's here. Yeah. So I have this folder here called JavaScript practice. Just go ahead and open it. All right. And just keep this on the side. We will be basically importing this, or we'll be opening this folder into VS Code. Okay. So what you have to do is just click on the top, and you can see the full path of your folder appears. I'm showing this for a Windows system, but then for macOS users, the process is kind of similar. So what you can do is, once you have created the folder, just open a new VS Code window. All right. So create a folder in your desktop or wherever you prefer. Then open a fresh new VS Code window. Okay. And then you have to go to File menu. There's an option called Open Folder. And in this dialog box, you can select the folder that you just made. Okay. So I will just say, just give me a second. Yeah. So this is the folder that I had just created. It's in my desktop. I have selected the folder, and then I'll open it. Okay. So I hope from the previous workshops, you are aware on what a workspace is and how to create or how to open a folder within VS Code and all the benefits that come with it. So this is what you'll have with your VS Code window. You can see that there is the Explorer panel here, and this is the name of the folder that you just created. And as you can see, there are no files which are inside this folder. Okay. So we'll be creating a HTML file first, but then we won't have much stuff to do in the HTML. So we just need it for the sake of running the JavaScript code. Okay. So what I will do, I just click here to create a new file and call it index.html. Okay. And once you have created this, also create a new file called index.js. Honestly, you can name these files whatever you like, but the convention is to call them index.html and sometimes main.js or index.js. So it's easier to go with the convention so that you just understand the concepts better. And when you look up these terms online, you will also find more relevant articles and all these things. Okay. So far what we have done is we have just opened the folder within VS Code, and we have created, it's a new folder. Okay. And we have just created two empty files, index.html and index.js. Okay. I hope everyone's following along so far. And if anyone has a doubt, please raise your hand, or you can just unmute and speak. Okay, cool. So let's start with it. Okay. Now the next thing you need to do is open your extensions. You can just go to the view menu, and there will be an option called extensions. All right. And that basically opens up this panel on the side where you can browse for a bunch of extensions. What we'll be installing today is called Lives Preview. Just type it out like this. Okay. And you can install this extension in your VS Code. So we have done this in the previous sessions, but just in case you haven't been there, you can just get it now. This is the extension by Microsoft, and you can install this. So the point of this extension is that when you have a web page that you're working on, like HTML files, every time you press the save button, it will automatically reload the web page for you. And it also has some other benefits, like it hosts the HTTP server for you, which is required in some of the cases. Okay. So just you can install this extension in VS Code. Again, just click on this icon on the left panel and search for it. Okay, I hope everyone's installed the extension. And what you can do is go back to the file list on the left side, as you can see here, and you can find your index.html file here. So what you have to do is just right click on the file, and then there will be an option called as start show preview. It's called show preview. Okay. So when you click on this option, a web browser will open, and you can see that this is the empty window that I'm getting, right? It's since we have no HTML code, it is just blank. But if you have gotten this far, then that means your live preview server is working. So what we can do is let's make some changes to our code. Okay. So in the HTML file, you can start typing as such. Just when you type, just type these two characters as you can see here. So the open angle bracket, I'm sorry, what is this? The less than sign and then followed by the exclamation mark. You will get an autocomplete that says doc type. So when you get this, just click on it. Um, okay, that's uneventful. Okay, the better thing you can do is just type less than symbol HTML, and when you type when you just press tab to complete. Oh, hold on. Just type HTML, yeah, and you will see an autocomplete that says HTML sample, and when you just click on it, you will get this whole template here. Or in case you're not getting it, just you can copy something like this. I'll send it in the chat. So this is basically like a boilerplate code as it was introduced in the last session, and all this does is just create a basic like a template for you to start working with. Okay. So I hope everyone's created this template. If anyone has an issue, please let me know. Okay, so let's first go through this file, yeah, because there is some stuff that we need to know. And I will delete a bunch of the lines which are not really important. So all we need right now are these lines. Okay, so I'm sure you might have learned in the previous session on how the HTML document is structured. So we have two tags, basically head and body. The head tag contains some general stuff that's required for your web page, but that's not displayed to the user immediately. So the first thing we are doing is setting the page title. Let's say let's call it my JavaScript tutorial. And then the second line imports the CSS script style sheet. But then for this project, we haven't made a CSS style sheet. So you can technically ignore this for now. So I have just commented it out. The third line here is script import. So what this does is you have a file called main.js, and it will basically import or like load the JavaScript code from it. But then if you remember, we had called our file index.js. So what you can do is just rename this line to index.js. or it's up to you. You can basically use the same name with both the places. All right. So once you have done this, just go back to the web browser, and you won't see much again because the body of the web page is still empty. But you can see at the top that the title is updated. And all you did was just press Control S, and every time you press Control S, the web page reloads automatically. Okay. So right now, let's just add some sample text to the body of the code. So when the moment I type this and I press Control S, you can see that it has appeared in the body. Okay. So I hope everyone's following along so far. So, and if, of course, if anyone has doubts, please raise your hand and we'll get you. Okay. So this is a template HTML code and JavaScript. Well, there's nothing right now. But then the next thing I want to introduce to you is something called DevTools. So it is a really useful feature of the web browsers these days. And you can use it to check console output, debug JavaScript, debug like HTML code, everything, right? So what you can do is just right click anywhere on the page and you will see an option called inspect, or you might have remembered it as inspect element. So just click on this inspect element option. And what you see here is that a panel on the side of your browser opens up, and in case this in the three dots menu, you can choose where the panel appears. So some people prefer to keep it at the bottom, so I will do that for this session. All right. So here you can see it has a bunch of tabs. One is called the elements, and you can see that the HTML code which you type is basically appearing here. Okay. You can also see that the body of the HTML page appears here as well. And every time you put your mouse on top of an element, you can see that it gets highlighted in the body, as you can see like this. If I keep my mouse on the HTML tag, you can see that the entire document gets highlighted. And fun fact, the HTML document is only till this point. It doesn't go to the entire height of the page. So keep this in mind. If at all later you get any CSS headaches, this could be a reason. Okay. Getting back on track, this is our body tag, and this is the head tag, which doesn't show up on the web page because there's nothing that's user facing. Okay. Now we have a second tab called console, which is where we can see we can run JavaScript statements here, and we can also see the outputs of previous JavaScript statements here. So let's just type 1+1, and you can see that, well, this is quite obvious, but then this just shows that your JavaScript code is working. All right. And every time you reload the page, all the variables that you created, or I mean any code that you typed earlier, will disappear. So what you can do is press the up arrow to like call the same statement back. Okay. So let me just summarize. When you right click on a page and click the inspect button, you will be seeing this dialog or this panel. And this panel basically allows us to check the output of JavaScript code, which is very useful if you're learning JavaScript and you want to just like temporarily see what your code is doing. So you can always use this tool for that purpose. Okay. And this console tab is the most important one. In case you have a console tab at the bottom, you can just close it so that you save some of your screen space. Okay. All right. So now that we have the console ready, what we are going to do is we are going to write code in our JavaScript JavaScript file that we created earlier, and we will see its output appear in this spot. Okay. So you can go back to your VS Code window, and what I'm going to do is in my index.js file, you can let's start with variables. Okay. So if you remember from the documentation, it is basically there are two types of creating variables. One is called let and one is called const. So let's just say let my name is equal to Srini and let my age is equal to 21. Okay. So when I create these two lines, it basically creates two variables, and that's about it. So if you go back to the browser, you can see no output basically. But then when you type the symbol my name or my age, you can see that I'm able to I'm able to check the value of the variable that I just created. Okay. So this is how the console works, where you can just type the name of a variable, and if you hit enter, it will display the value that it has at that moment. Okay. So if you notice, I had also introduced something called const, correct? So let's say I'm changing my age to const. So this is what I'm doing. I'm saying my name is Srini in double quotes. So this is a string data type. We'll get to it later. And this is a number which is stored in this constant called my age. So now when I save this file, you can see that the page got reloaded. So everything got deleted. Again, if I check my name, I can still check my name, and if I type my age, it still shows the value. But then what I can do is, this is the syntax, by the way. You have to type let space the name of your variable, put an equal to sign, and then give the value that you want, and then end your line with a semicolon. Okay. Semicolons aren't necessary in JavaScript, but then for good code practice, it's always good that, I mean, it's always recommended that you put a semicolon. So similarly, the syntax for constants is also pretty much the same thing, where you type const followed by the name of the variable constant that you want, and after the equal to sign, you can assign, you can type out the value that you want to save. Okay. So here again, my name is this, my age is this, but then now I can also assign to a variable that I just created earlier, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say my name is equal to MTC. So here, if you notice, I have not used the let keyword here, whereas here I have used the let keyword. What this means is here you're creating the variable, and here you're assigning the variable to a different value. So the variable name remains the same, but then you're just updating its value to something. So now when I run this code and then I check the value of my name, it's going to print the latest value. So as you can see, it just says MTC. Okay. Now we can also try something for let's say I'm going to update the value of the constant. But then as you can guess probably that this is not going to work, and we will see our first error in JavaScript. So when you go back here, you can say that uncaught error, assignment to a constant variable. So it basically says that this is you are not allowed to assign to a constant variable, and hence it is an error. So, and it also says the line number at where the error occurred. So when you click on it, you can see that it has underlined the part of the code which is causing the error. Okay. So I hope you are following so far, where we have set up the HTML files, and also we have tried our first JavaScript statement. So if anyone's having any doubts, please do mention it in the chat. Whoever's getting the output in the console, just raise your hands. Like when you try to assign to a constant, you should be getting this error. So just raise your hands. So let me see. Guys, come on, guys. We need more participation. Okay, that's really cool. So let's proceed with the, well, yeah, let's proceed basically. We have covered variables and constants so far. The second concept we'll cover is something called data types. So data type is a really simple concept. It basically says what is the kind of the value that you're trying to store. So some very basic examples are strings. Strings is basic. A string is basically a text. So any piece of text. So if I store, let's say your name, or let's say I store your parents' name or something like that, it will be of the data type string. Similarly, there's a data type called number. I think you can infer the meaning, which is that it can store any kind of number. Let it be an integer, or is it like a number with a decimal point in it, anything. All of them fall under this category. There is a third data type called Boolean, and the only possible allowed values for a Boolean are true and false. So what this means is it's like a very simple yes or no kind of value. So maybe, for example, let's say I'm creating a variable that says whether you are present in the workshop or not. And I can set its, if I want its data type to be a Boolean data type, its value can be set to true because you all are in the workshop right now. And for your friends who haven't joined, you can set their value as false and guilt trip them because why are they not in the workshop? Now there are few more data types. It's basically called null and undefined. So there is a very slight difference between them, but for the most part, you can assume that these two are the same. Like when it comes to their behavior, and if you're curious about it, you can explore its detail later. But then for our purposes right now, both of these behave the same. And what these both kind of define is that it's like a lack of a value. So what I mean by null and undefined is that let's just say I create a variable, my name, and then I do not give it a value. This is also a valid syntax. What this tells is that basically I have created a variable by this name, but then I haven't actually given it a value. So now when I go to the web browser and then I reload the page, let's say I type my name, and you can see its value is written as undefined. Okay. You can also do this manually. Let's just say null. I can set its value to null. And what happens is when I reload the page, or it reloads for you, and then I check the value of my name, it displays the value as null. So this is useful in a bunch of contexts, right? Where you, let's say you created a variable first with a value, and then later you want to remove the value, but then you still want to keep the variable. So in this case, the variable has the name, has the value my name, but then I can also say it is equal to null. So now when I check its value again, you can see that it displays the value null. Okay. So this is the point behind null and undefined and all those similar terms. Again, there is a bit of nuance for this, but we'll just skip over it for now. The next data type, it's quite interesting actually. It's called an array, and you might have heard of it in like other programming languages. And the concept is basically the same here. It's basically a collection of objects. Let's say you want to store a list of your favorite hobbies, and let me just create it here, and I'll just let hobby 1 is equal to programming, hobby 2 is equal to music. Remember to put semicolons. Let hobby 3 is equal to, let's say, photography. So if I have these hobbies, and let's say I want to add like 10 more hobbies to my list, I can't just create 10 variables, correct? I mean, you can create, but then it will get really messy. Let's say you want to, display all of the 10 hobbies to, let's say, the user or something. So it will get really difficult, right? So the better way to do this is to create an array of these values. So the syntax for it is that I'll use the let statement again, and I'll call it hobbies. And in the place of the value here, I'll basically put square brackets. And you can extend the square brackets to multiple lines if you want, and that's completely up to you. So what I'll do here is I'll create a string called programming. I'll create a string called music, and I'll create a string called photography. So what I have done is I've basically created an array which contains 3 values. Okay, it's as you can see here, or if you want, I can also put them on separate lines as such. And whichever notation you choose, it's completely up to you. You just choose whichever looks nice to your eyes. Okay. So what happens is if I want to add more stuff here, let's say art, and I can just add a new value to this array without having to create a fourth variable or something like that. So now that I have this array, let's go back to the console and type hobbies. You can see that it has printed, it has created an object, a special notation for you. And this web browser thing, this console thing also shows the index of each item. And index basically tells the position of the item in the array. So if I have programming as my first one, the index is given as 0, because we in programming the array indices are counted from 0. That's a convention. Okay. Music has an index of 1, and so and so. And you can see it also shows the length is equal to 4. So array is a really useful concept for storing a continuous list or like a collection of a lot of things. Okay. So you will be coming across arrays a lot. So that covers that. And these are pretty much the basic data types which you need to get a good grasp on, because a lot of the other data types are built on top of these. So these are the really fundamentals. Okay. So now these are the next type of the next concept in JavaScript is called operators, where you basically can take multiple values and then do some logic with them. So let's say I have a number value in one variable and I have a number value in a second variable. Now I want to add these two numbers and store it in a third variable. So the fact that I'm going to add them is performed by this operator, the plus operator. And similarly, you have the subtraction, multiplication, division. You have these operators called comparison operators, and you have something called logical operators. So let's quickly explore them with a very simple example. Okay. And what I'm going to do is, uh, let's say I want to calculate the year when I was born. Okay. So I'm going to create a constant called current year, and it's 2025, correct? But and I want to store, I want to create a constant, or let's say I want to create a variable, whichever you prefer, where I'm going to calculate the difference between these two, and that will basically give me the year of my birth. Okay. So what you can do is you can just take current year, put a minus sign, and you can just type your other, well, the value that you want to subtract. Here it's my age, and this basically performs the subtraction for you. It takes the value that comes out of it, and then it puts it in the variable. Okay. You can also do this in a second way. I can first declare the variable. In other words, I can first create the variable, and then I can assign the value of the variable in a separate statement. Both of these are valid JavaScript code, and you can just choose whichever you feel like doing. And the shorter way to write it is just put everything in one line. So now when I have these lines of code, I have my age here as a number, I have a current year as a number, and I'm going to perform an operation between two numbers. So let's take this value, go back to our browser, and then type it here. So you can see the output has been calculated and it displays 2004. And similarly, you can apply all the other operators as well. Okay. So now there is, these are the arithmetic operators. Now let's quickly explore comparison operators. This basically, as the name says, it will allow you to compare two values. Okay. And see if they're equal or they're not equal, or let's say they're greater than the other or something. Now I have, let's say I have a friend who is 25 years old, and I want to see if these two variables are of the same value. So I can just say const r is, so I'm going to create a variable called is equal age, and what it will do is I'm going to put brackets here, and I'm putting brackets just for the sake of reading it. So what we are going to do is we are going to check if this is equal to my friend's age. So if you remember, we had like seen the concept of a boolean, which is basically a yes or no value. And if you look at this statement, sorry, there are three equal to signs. That's the way with JavaScript. There is a comparison being performed here. I'm going to check if 21 is equal to 25 in short, right? And this will give me a yes or no value. We know that the answer is no, but then this kind of statements are useful everywhere in JavaScript. So since this results in a yes or no value, the output of this is a Boolean type, and it will be stored in this constant. Okay. So let's save this file, and then I'm going to check the value of this one in the console. Okay. So when I type it, you can see that it says false. So this is the output of the expression that I had written. So anything that you write here is called an expression. Expression basically is something that can simplify to a value. And let's say you open your calculator app, and you just type some well, you do some stuff, right? Let's say 2025 minus 21. So when you hit enter, you get the result here, right? And then what you see on the top is the actual equation, you can call it, or the correct way to call it is called an expression. So you'll be using expressions everywhere in every programming language, not just JavaScript. So this is another terminology you can keep in mind. Okay. Now maybe I can, what if I want to check if the age is not equal? And let's just create a new variable. Okay. And I want to return true if they are not, I mean, I want to get the value as true if they are unequal, and I want to get the value as false if they are equal. So what I can do is I can replace this operator with the exclamation equal to. So this is a JavaScript operator that basically checks if they are not equal to each other. So I think the logic is kind of clear. So let's check the value of this, and it says true. Okay. And this is how the comparison operators work. You can also check like greater than or less than. So let's say my age greater than my friend's age, and this will give a yes or no value again, because there is only one answer to it, right? And when I check the value of this expression, it basically says if 21 is greater than 25. And when I print it, it says false, as you can expect. Similarly, you can also check if less than. And you also have stuff like greater than, equal to, all these kind of things. Okay. Basically what you type in a normal calculator. So that basically is our comparison operators. Now, there is also something called logical operators, where you can combine two Boolean statements. Okay. So I think we'll explore this in later parts of code, as and when we see it. So here's the next part of JavaScript. I mean, so far is everyone clear with data types and operators? Just raise your hands. And if anyone has a doubt, please mention it. All right, that's great. Let's continue with control flow. So control flow is a fancy word, and all it means is that you are basically changing which parts of your code are executing and which parts of your code will not execute. So you're basically controlling the flow of your program. Okay. The first thing is called if else statements, where the syntax of the code looks like this. Basically, you have a condition here, which is a true or false value that you can get however you want. And then if this condition is giving a true value, then you will, the JavaScript, well, your browser will run these statements. Now, if let's say if you want to check another condition, you can use the else if notation. And finally, if all of these do not happen to be true, like in other words, if all of these are false, then this block of code will execute. So let's do a quick example. And right now I'd like to introduce a command. It's called console.log. And I'll just demonstrate it first. So this is the syntax for it. What it does is when you run this code, you can see in the console that it has already printed the value, or it has already displayed the value in the console. Okay. So this will be very useful for debugging purposes, where you basically write console.log and then put whatever value that you want to put. So let's say I want to check the value of is greater. When I do that, this is a false value, correct? Because 21 is not greater than 25. And this value, it's a Boolean type, as you can see in this pop-up. And this will be basically printed to the console. And as you can see, it has already displayed the value false. And yeah, there's a word called printing, which basically in computer science, printing basically means the same as displaying to a console. Okay, so I hope that's not confusing. So in that same way, we can also display whatever message we want. So when I print or when I display a statement like this, or run a statement like this, it takes the string object and then it gives it to the console.log function. It's a function which we'll cover later, but then you can just keep this syntax in mind. When I go reload the page, you can see that it has already appeared in the console. So with this, let's build a quick statement like programming. So we will simplify the code a bit. So we have our, like my age, my friend's age, which are both numbers, and then I'm checking if they both are equal. I'm going to write an if statement uh, that says if equal age, then I wanted to do show. Okay. And by the way, if you start your code with any line of code with a double slash, it basically becomes a comment. So comments are really useful, where you can basically ignore the entire line and your web browser will not even care about it. So this is really useful if you want to like explain your code to someone, like in the form of text. You can just drop comments all throughout the code, and that's a good practice to comment your code. So I'm going to basically this is what I want to do, correct? If the age is equal, I want to display a message like this. And if the age is not equal, because if this is false, then this will not execute. And when this condition is false, the second block of code will execute, which is called the else block. And I want to display a message something like this. So what I'm going to do is we'll just type everything in console.log and or like we can display a message like this. So if sorry, If the ages are equal, we are displaying this message. If not, we'll display the other message. Now, when I go back to the web browser, you can see that the message is already printed or displayed, and it just says ages are not equal. So I hope that clarifies how if statements work. And you can have multiple conditions. You can even have the condition expression here itself. So I can copy this and just paste it here. This is in fact a much more simpler form to write the code, because you're not creating unnecessary constants and variables just to check one condition, correct? So I'm directly checking if the age is equal, and then accordingly I'm taking an action with the help of if statements. And if I go back to the web browser, you can see that the same output is here, even if I reload. So I hope everyone's clear with if statements so far. If you have any doubts, please raise your hand. And if you're clear, you guys can just give thumbs up react. So it gives me feedback that you guys are actually following along. Okay. Okay. The next concept is a for loop. Now, let's say you want to run an action multiple number of times. So I want to print my name, let's say 10 times. And let's just go down here and let's say console.log and my name. So when I do this, it will print my name exactly once, correct? Because I've typed it only once. As you can see here, my name is printed. But then if I want to print it 10 times, maybe I can paste the line for 10 times, but then it will print, yeah, but it gets hectic, as you can see, right? And say I want to print this 100 times, that's going to be really inefficient to create like 100 lines of code just to print my name. So what I'm going to do instead, let's just change it to MTC, and I'm going to create a for loop. If you're using Visual Studio Code, you can see that the autocomplete is already there for you. And just look for the autocomplete ones which have a square in the symbol, like this one, not the cube or whatever else. This square basically gives the template for you. Okay. And what I'm going to do is basically give it a count like this. And this is the syntax. Okay. So for loop has three parts, as you can see here. And we will be using a concept called a counter. So every time the for loop runs, every time it runs your statement, it will have a variable that it keeps incrementing. So if I run, let's say I want to count from 1 to 10, then I can use this variable to do the counting for me. Okay. So that's the benefit of a for loop. So I'm going to say the first part of the for loop is divided into like three parts. I've just spaced it out. The first part creates the variable that you want to use for counting. This part basically checks the condition. If only when this condition is valid, it will run your piece of code. And when the condition is true, after your code finishes running, this will be run at the end of your code. Okay. So I plus plus, or I can just say I is equal to I plus 1. Okay. This is a very simple notation. What I'm going to do, and yeah, what I'm going to do is just print my name for 10 times. What happens is this value of this special variable, in fact, it's not a special variable, it's just a normal variable. Okay. The value of this variable gets set to 0 at the start, and it will check if 0 is less than 10, which is true, correct? 0 is always less than 10. When this is true, it will run this line of code, and you can see that the output will appear in the console. After this line of code is run, the last thing that will happen is it will run this third part of the for loop syntax. And what we have told it to do is to increase the value of I by 1. Okay. So basically what happens is this value starts at 0. This block will run. Then it changes to 1. This will run. Changes to 2. It will run again. Changes to 3. All the way till it changes to 9. Okay. When it becomes 9, 9 is still less than 10. Correct. So it will run for it will run with the i's value is equal to 9, and then I gets increased to 10. Now when i's value becomes 10, this condition is false, right? Because 10 is no longer less than 10. It is exactly equal to 10. So that's when the entire loop stops working, and then it will proceed to the lines of code below it. Okay. So now when I go to the console, you can see that okay, this is a browser feature where it is grouping the same statement bunch of times, but then you can see basically prints the name MTC 10 times. Or what I'll do is rather I'll just print the value of I, and you can see that it is printed 0, 1, 2, 3 all the way till 9. Okay, so this is how the for loop syntax works. You can always take help of VS Code's autocomplete. So use it to get the code up and running, but then also spend time to understand the code. Okay. So I hope everyone's clear with for loops right now. Okay, so there is also a thing called a while loop, which basically runs as long as the condition is true without stopping. The code will only stop when the condition becomes false. So I hope that's clear. Now let's move on to a very important aspect of JavaScript called functions. Okay, so let's start with that. A function is basically a piece of code which you can reuse. And what I mean by that is you can write your piece of code in the special notation, and every time you want to run this, you can just type the name of this function and it will run the code. You can think of it like a maths function where you, let's say f of x is equal to something sine plus cos plus so and so. So instead of writing the whole thing every time, you can just say f of 3 or f of 4, right? So by the same logic, we are going to create a function in our code, right? Let's just take something like this. I will probably get rid of this stuff. So yeah, I have created a function called add numbers. So what it does is, this is the syntax for it. You write the word function, give it a name, and in these brackets, you give the list of inputs that you want the function to take. So my function will take two inputs, number one and number two, okay? And within the functions blocks, which you can see with the curly braces, you can write whatever code you want that makes use of these inputs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a constant called sum, and that's going to take the value of number one and add it with the value of number two. Okay. Now inside a function, there's a special statement and it's called the return statement. Return statement, basically you can put any value here and it will be given as the output of this function. So you can remember that a function can have a bunch of inputs and it will have exactly one output or it will have no outputs. Okay. So now, let's say I want to run this function and I want to give it two numbers. Okay. So I'm going to say console.log. I'm going to say add numbers and you have to run the function by putting the brackets again. Okay. So use brackets in both the places, except here you give the name of the input and here you give the actual value of the input. So let's say I'm going to take my age, I'm going to take my friend's age, or let's just start with something simpler, 10 and 20, okay? Remember your semicolons. And when you run this statement, it basically this add numbers gets executed first. So 10 gets stored into number one, 20 gets stored into number two. They're added and stored in sum. And then the value of sum is given back to the output. So I can also do something like this. Const result is equal to something. So this gets evaluated to 30 and this 30 is stored in this constant called result. And I'm just going to log it. And when I run console.log result, you can, the log is also a function that takes an input if you think of it, right? Let's just look at this code and see how it works in the browser. You can see that the value of 30 has gotten printed to the console. Okay. So that's basically functions. And now we have another type of functions called arrow functions, which is used extensively in React. Okay. So what it does is it writes the entire function in like one or two lines. So this notation looks very confusing, but basically wherever you see the equal to with the greater than sign, it looks like an arrow mark, right? So they are called arrow functions. Arrow functions are a very simple shorthand notation. You write the name of your inputs in brackets at the start, and and then after that you put the arrow symbol, and then you write the value which you want to calculate out of these inputs. Okay. So let's just convert this add numbers function into, well, an arrow function, right? So I can say something like num1 comma num2. I'll put an arrow mark here, and then I will say num1 plus num2. This will be the value that's calculated out of these inputs. Now this function is there, but I can also store the function itself in a variable. So I can say const my function add numbers arrow. Let's just call it like this, okay? So what I've done here is that this is a normal function, but this is an arrow function which I happen to store in a variable. Okay, so you can literally call this as a function now, and you can run it like give it to the console. So I hope arrow functions are making sense. It's basically where you can write an entire function in one single line. And the special idea is that you can also give this function to another function as an input. So that's a quite an interesting concept which we kind of use a lot in React. Okay. So just keep arrow functions in mind. All right. You can put anything you want. You can put this in brackets. You can maybe like multiply the two numbers and then like divide it by 100, or whatever that you want. And all the all the basic arithmetic operator rules that you learned earlier, they will apply here. Okay, so just remember, if at all any error is coming, just try to put them in a bracket so that the operators are like solved correctly or they are applied correctly. Okay, so I'll just keep it to num1, or let's just call it multiply numbers. So I've called this arrow function as multiply numbers arrow. I'm going to use it as if it's a regular function. If you notice here, both of them are used in the exact same way. There is no difference in how you use them. And when I, let's say 10 and 35, when I give these inputs, you can see the answer will be 350. As you can see, it's printed 350 in the console. Okay, so I hope everyone's clear with how arrow functions work. So if you're clear with it, just raise your hands. Or you can give a thumbs up react. I think that'll be easier. Okay, that's cool. And we have this concept called functional programming, where there are special functions called map, filter, and reduce. So these are the holy trinity of functional programming. So you might have heard of object-oriented programming, and this is like another type of programming called functional programming. There is a special function called map, which we will quickly explore here, because we will at times be using this in React when you want to, let's say, convert a list of values into something that you can show to the web page. So what map essentially does is it takes a function and then applies the function on every single value in the array. Okay. And let me repeat that. Map is a special function that accepts a function itself as an argument, that function that you define, and then it will call that it will execute that function on every single value that's there in an array. So let's say I have an array called numbers here, 1, 2, and 3, fine. And then I want to create a new array, which basically is, let's say it multiplies every single value by 2. So the syntax for this is that I'm saying numbers dot map. This is a syntax to call the map function for this array of numbers. And you can, if just look at what I've highlighted here. It is basically an arrow function that takes one number as input and returns one output, which is the twice of it. Okay. So now if I copy this piece of code, this function will basically give me the final array, and I have decided to store it in this constant called doubled. So let's try to run this piece of code. I'll comment this out. Okay. So just to summarize, we have an array here. Then I'm going to call the map function, which basically takes a function itself as an argument. Or if you want, we can also just you can also do something like this, where basically I'm going to call it the doubler function, okay? Because it's a function that takes a single value and then multiplies it by 2. So what I've done is basically call the map function and pass the value itself, pass the function itself to the function. So that's kind of an interesting concept, right? So it might take some time to wrap your head around this idea, because only some other languages support it. For example, C doesn't exactly support this, but Python also does this if you have used Python before, okay? So whatever the output you get is stored here, and when you check the output in the console, you can see that the array is printed, displayed, and it has values 2, 4, and 6. Okay, so that's basically a very brief introduction to functional programming as well, and the most useful function here is called the map function. So I hope everyone's clear with this as of now. Can give like a thumbs up react. Okay, that's cool. So we will be starting with React now, basically. So I'll just quickly brief through what JavaScript is. So we have a concept called variables, which is basically like a box in which you can put a value, and the box has a name to it, and the syntax you had seen us use it. And for let variables, you can change the value later on, but if you create something with const, you cannot change it once you assign the value. Okay. The second concept is called data types, where basically says what is the kind of the value. So it could be text, it could be number, it could be a yes or no value, or it could be the lack of a value. You can still store the lack of a value, or like, the fact that there is no value is also represented as a value. So that's how a lot of programming languages work. And null is a very popular keyword. Okay. So arrays is the next data type, which is basically a collection of objects. And each object in this can have its own data type. It need not be the same. I can store text here, I can store a number here, I can store a boolean here, and JavaScript still accepts it. The third concept is called operators, and it's basically what you can do with multiple values. You can combine multiple values with meaningful ways, and these are the operators that we have explored. The next concept is called control flow, which basically changes how your code runs and decides which piece of your code runs or doesn't run, stuff like that. Okay. So we have three types of control flows, which are like the most useful ones. So this is called an if statement. And this basically decides which piece of code runs depending on a Boolean condition. There is a concept called for loop, which lets you repeat a piece of code for multiple number of times. And there is a third concept called a while loop, which basically allows you to run a piece of code as long as a given condition is true. So you don't need to give the count here necessarily. There is a next concept, it's called functions. Functions is basically a block of code which you can reuse multiple times. And you can, the act of executing a function is called as calling a function. Okay. So when I say I make a function like this, and I can take the two values, like say 10 and 20, I have to call the add numbers function and give it these two values. And similarly, there's a concept called arrow functions, which is just a special notation, but it has its own benefits, which we'll extensively see in React. Okay. Functional programming is it's a type, it's a philosophy of programming, and JavaScript supports both object oriented as well as functional programming. So it's a really versatile language, and you can choose which philosophy of programming you want to do. And in React, we'll be using this map function quite a lot, and this map function is available within it comes with the arrays. You don't have to like define it or something. Okay. Map function basically takes another function, and then it runs a for loop within it. So you don't see the for loop, but there is a for loop going on here that basically calls the function on each of the values and then stores the result of that value in a new array. Okay. So with this, our JavaScript brief is done. So we will start introduction to React, but before that, we'll have like a short 5-10 minutes break. So you guys can like stretch or drink water. And in the meanwhile, if you have any doubts, please mention in the chat. I'll be here. Okay. So aside from that, we'll resume in some 5-10 minutes. Okay. Hi guys, let's resume the workshop. I hope you drank enough water because it's still hot outside. Alright, so we'll be continuing or we'll be starting with React basically. JavaScript was quite a long topic, I agree, but then it is a lot of basics that you need to know for using React. So if you know JavaScript, you are already half ready with React. And I'm assuming you already know HTML from the previous classes. So that's also like 75% done with React basically. Okay, so let's start exploring React code. Now, just to recap the basics of React, it's basically a JavaScript library and you use it to build websites. And the benefit that React gives is that there's a lot of useful concepts such as splitting your code into like multiple files. And for example, you don't want to have a single HTML file that has like 2000 lines of code, right? Then maintaining it will become a real difficulty. So React offers the concept of modularity, which is a feature of JavaScript, right? And that's what React is using to offer this feature. So there are so many such benefits to it. Okay, we will start with first like going through another tool called Veet. This is the spelling. It's a French word, so pronounce it however you want. We have the Indian privilege. Veet is a build tool, and what a build tool does is basically there's 3 points. Now, the way we write React code is with a special variant of JavaScript called JSX. Okay, now this is JavaScript code after all, but then it also allows you to type HTML code inside the JavaScript code. So that's the key part of React. Okay, so JSX code is specific to React. Your regular web browsers, they do not come with the React library or they do not come with a React compiler or anything like that, right? So you need to have some tools that will convert the JSX code into regular React code. And Veet is a very popular tool and it has so many other benefits. And I think it's one of the officially recommended tools by the React team to convert the code. So first one we have just talked about it. Now, if you remember the live server thing, you remember whenever I press Ctrl S in VS Code, the page immediately reloads, correct? So such a similar feature is offered by Veet as well, and it's called hot module reloading. So this is a new term you can just keep in mind, or you will see this HMR term in the console, like in the command prompt quite a bit. So this is what it means. So it basically reloads your modules in a much more efficient way, even without refreshing the entire page. So the moment you hit Control S, the change is already there in the website before you even blink your eye. The third benefit of using such a build tool is that Veed specifically compacts and merges all your JavaScript code into just a few files. So if you look at the portfolio website which we had from the previous sessions, you can see there's a lot of files here, right? So there is a file for the about page. For the about section, there's a file for the contact section. There's one for footer, header, the projects list, the skills list, and even stuff like that. So we have some a bunch of files which makes development of these files much easier. But then uh, if you're sending all these 20 files to the user and let's say 100 users access your webpage, so you're basically dealing with 2000 files being sent out every single day, and that's going to really mess up your server, and it's going to like cost money and performance and all these things, right? And it's going to be slow for the user as well because now the user has to wait for every single file to load. So how about we just combine all of these files, just like not for the development purpose, but then when you're done developing with the web page, all these files will be combined into like with this special program, and that program is what Veet does basically. So we don't have to do much work in this. All we have to do is just install Veet, and Veet comes with a bunch of default options. And these default options are automatically synchronized with React and all this stuff. So all you have to do is just run a bunch of commands to install Veet, React, and all that, and you're just ready to go. Okay. So I hope everyone's clear with what React is. I hope everyone's clear with the basics of JavaScript, like just the bare minimum that we need for React, and also what is the purpose of Veet in this context. It's important that you know what these tools do so that if you face any issues later on, you can always you can always message us, but then you'll feel better solving it by yourself, right? And for that you need to know which part of your tool chain, or which part of your project setup is causing the error. So let's say there was a error with the JavaScript code. You wouldn't checking Vite documentation will not help you much with it, right? So this is the reason why it's really important to know the tools that you use before use them. Okay, so this is the very basic theory, and we will also be using Tailwind CSS, which you had learned in the previous sessions. So Tailwind CSS is basically a add-on to CSS, and it makes your styling process a lot simpler, and that's pretty much about it. Okay, and it Tailwind CSS also needs some setup. So we have a lot of official documentation on their corresponding web pages, and I have just compiled them in this document. You can scroll up in the chat, and you will see the links, and the links for this document where all the code is located. So we are going to basically create our first React project. Okay, so I will do one thing. I will close this live preview server, right? I can go back to the, hold on. Yeah, this is the folder which we had, correct? So let me just say I want to ignore this, or let's just keep this files here for now, and I will be creating a new folder in which I'm going to keep my React project. So in VS Code itself, let's use the same window because it's a bit convenient. Okay, so just go to the terminal menu. There is an option called new terminal. Okay, or if you have an existing terminal, just you can use it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a bunch of commands that will basically create a boilerplate React project. And what boilerplate basically means is that for setting up these projects, you need to configure a bunch of files, and all of these files will be automatically created for you with a single command. So that's really helpful, because these few files are always the same for every single project that you make with React, or any technology for that matter. So you don't have to by heart these files, right? You can just have a command that creates these files for you, and then you can customize them as per your need. So what you can do is just look at this code snippet, and I suggest you copy these lines one after the other. So let me just repeat. Go back to the VS Code window that you had for the JavaScript practice. You can ignore these two files, and what I will do is just create a new terminal in this menu. Make sure your PowerShell or your command prompt, or if you're on macOS, your terminal is open here, and copy the first line of code and paste it. Okay, so this npm is what we have covered in the first session, and npm is basically a package manager. It will create, this command basically creates a Vite project for, like, Vite plus React project for you. Okay, and here's the name of the folder. It's called my portfolio. You can change it to whatever you want. For the sake of simplicity, do not put any space characters, like don't use your space bar. Okay, you can give it a moment, and then you can see that the my portfolio command folder has been created. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just type the cd command, and I'm going to enter the folder which I just created. Okay, give me a second. Sorry about that. Yeah, so once you have run the first command, you should get an output like this which is done. Okay, so now you can run cd space the name of the folder. In my case, it's my portfolio. Okay, and once you're inside this, you can go back to the list of commands, and you can run this command, that's npm install and all that stuff. This basically installs Tailwind and also the other libraries that already got included with the template that you just made. Okay, so in short, this installs all the necessary packages: Tailwind, React, and also Vite. Vite is also given through Node, okay, or npm. Let me hit enter. It will take like 1 or 2 minutes. So I hope you guys are following along, and every step in this is critical. Okay, so if at all you get stuck in either of any of the steps, you can just drop a message. Okay, so we have a question in the chat where the question is if we just type this much. So I haven't tried it out honestly. Like if you just type npm create Vite latest, so these are all templates that's publicly available, and you can, I guess, you can like just look it up. And Vite is such a template. Now, Vite in and of itself is pointless, right? It's a build tool, but then you don't have any code to build, and it also comes with a template. That's where you have this part of the command, right? I think that's correct. Okay, my bad. So this part of the command basically says you create a project with Vite in it, and then also use React. Like also install the React library in it, and React also needs some other configuration files here. Okay, and you know it has created some dummy React code here. So all that will come with this template, and then you can also like give the name of the folder here, which I've given as my portfolio. Okay, so when you run this is what the entire command does. It creates Vite with React as a template, because Vite can also be used with other technologies. For this workshop, we are covering React. Give the name of the folder here and you're good to go. So we have another question in the chat. Uh, okay, for session 1 and session 2, you can just go to the same GitHub project. Just in the top, you can just click on the docs link, and when you click that, you can just see there's the markdown files, or just if you scroll down, there's links for session 1, 2, and 3. And for the recordings of the meetings, you might have, there's a link in the chat as well, and you would have received an email. Okay, and if anyone doesn't have the recordings for the previous meetings, please do let us know in the MTC chill group, or you can also just type it in the meeting chat. Okay, all right. So that's for the previous session. And yeah, just to summarize, NPM is a package manager, as in it allows you to download modules that other people have made, because you don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? You can just download the wheel. Okay. And that's almost it for setting up the project. So once you have okay, one moment. Okay, Hanifa, just like is one of the council members will add you to the group shortly. Okay, if it's I mean, can any council member just type their phone number in the chat so that you guys can message? Okay, so just clear it out. All right, so I'll continue with the workshop for now. Yeah, so this install command installs all the packages as well as the extra stuff necessary for Tailwind CSS. Okay, because the template that we just created doesn't come with Tailwind. That's why we are installing it like as a separate command. So now this is a fourth command. This is given by the official documentation for Tailwind, and it basically does some extra setup. Like there are some 2 more files that you need to create, and that's what this command will do. It's npx command, which is basically same as npm. They're kind of related. Okay, so this runs the command that initializes Tailwind related stuff. So you have to give it a moment. And you can see that there are 2 files that got created, tailwind.config and postcss.config. Okay. So I hope you guys have these files ready as of now. So just to summarize, we've basically run these 4 commands. Okay. And there is also the next thing you need to do is, if you remember, our VS Code is still in the old workspace, correct? And this is going to cause problems later on. So what we have to do is basically open our workspace in VS Code inside the My Portfolio folder. Okay. So what you can do is that in your terminal, just make sure the current folder is in My Portfolio, which is already there from the previous commands. Just type code space and then full stop. So this will open a new VS Code window, and that has just the portfolio stuff inside it. Okay, so I recommend you guys, it's very important that you open a VS Code window in just the portfolio folder. Okay, and you can like you can close the previous window if you want. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Let me just reiterate. You have to open a VS Code window inside the My Portfolio folder. You can use either method that you want, like, use the command to open VS Code, or you can just go to the file menu, open folder, all that stuff. Okay. So guys, just give a thumbs up reaction if you have reached so far. And yeah, if anyone has a doubt, please mention it in the chat. Okay, let's proceed with it. So what do we have here? We basically have an entire React Tailwind Vite template project that's ready, and it has a bunch of files in it, which I'll quickly go through them because there's not much complicated stuff in this. You might have seen the source code for the other, I mean, the portfolio website which we had shown, right? There's like so many files, so many weird folder structures and all this stuff. All this looks confusing, but then once you get the hang of it, it's really simple. So we'll also explore that going forward. So these are the files. Okay, we will again open a terminal in this window. Go to terminal and click on new terminal. Okay, and what I'll do is I'm going to just run. Okay, there's more configuration that you need to do. So there is a file called tailwindconfig.js, tailwind.config.js, and you need to copy this part. Again, all these things can be found in the official documentation. Okay, if you need to know more about it, so just copy these lines of code, and you can open in the left panel. You'll notice this file tailwindconfig.js. Okay, now wherever it says content, just take that full line, delete that line, and then paste it here. Okay, so this basically tells the um, what do you say, the tailwind processor. There's some stuff involved in it, so there is much. I won't go too much into the nuance, but this basically tells to look into all the JSX files as well. Okay, and yeah, the next thing we need to do for tailwind is copy these three lines of code, and then you'll have a file called source/index.css. Okay, so in the source folder, there's a file called index.css. Open it, and at the very start of the file, just paste these three lines. Okay, this basically allows you to import the other Tailwind class names, as you had learned in the previous session. So these class names are made available for you to use with the help of these three lines of code. Okay, and that's about it for the setup of the project. Now we need to also install some extensions in your Visual Studio Code. We had already covered these extensions in the first few workshops. Okay, but you can I'll also just paste these names in the chat, and you can take your time to install these. Okay, so the first two, I mean, this, yeah, I think just from the name you can tell the first one is for helpful for getting autocomplete for React. The second one is helpful for getting JavaScript autocomplete, and the third one is useful for getting Tailwind autocomplete, and the fourth one is required by the third one. So you don't have to worry about it, but just ensure you install these four extensions. It's very simple. Just go to the extensions panel. As in the view menu, you find extensions, and just search for the four names in this search box. If you don't have any of them, just make sure you install the four extensions. Okay, so once you're done with that, it will just take a few moments, but right now it's not very critical for you to install, so you can do it at your own pace. What you can do is the next thing, we are going to run the web page and actually see something, because so far we have been just typing code, typing commands. There's no output, right? So go back to the article and you see there's a command called npm run dev. Okay, and for whoever is curious, you can just open the package.json file, and that's where you see what each command does. So the dev command basically starts the Vite build tool. So this is where Vite comes into play. Okay, so whenever you type npm run dev, it's basically calling the Vite command internally. Okay, so this is just for if anyone's curious. Right. So when you type this command, ensure you're in the correct folder as we had discussed earlier, and hit the enter key, and you'll see a URL has appeared here, correct? And you see it's ready within a second. So you can just open the link in your web browser, and you can see that it comes with a a template page. Maybe just give it a moment for till it fully loads. And you can see there is some functionality that comes with it. And if you are getting so far, congratulations, you have set up your first React project. Okay. And If anyone's having an issue, please just drop a message in the chat. So yeah, let me just reiterate. We have basically set up. We have downloaded the React template along with Vite and Tailwind. We have installed Tailwind in it, and we have also configured some things. And finally, we have executed the command that starts a web server. Okay. So if anyone's, I hope everyone's seeing this page, and if anyone is not able to see this kind of a page on your web browser, just quickly drop a message in the chat, and we'll help you out. Okay. Now, moving on, we will start to basically create a basic React page. Okay. And for that, what we'll do is I'll quickly explain the folder structure. Okay. A lot of this goes by conventions. You don't have to create a SRC folder. You don't have to create an assist folder. And you don't have to put stuff like this. For a lot of the stuff, you can just put your JSX code in the main folder itself. But it's a bad practice because your folders get really messed up, and it'll become hard to follow through your files. Okay. So this is the common convention that's accepted in the React like templates kind of thing, where you have a folder called source, and that source folder contains the entire source code for your React web page. Everything else outside is just some general stuff that you're probably never going to touch like in the future. Okay. So the source folder is where you'll be primarily storing all your code files. So I have the HTML file here. If you notice, it is still a HTML project, correct? And if you remember from earlier, we are going to load our JavaScript with the help of a command. So now they happen to put the JavaScript in the body tag, but that's not an issue. But if you can see, the source of the JavaScript is given as a JSX file. So this is where our entry point is. So let me repeat the word. This is called an entry point. And in programming, entry point is the name of the function, which is the first thing that is run. Or in other words, it's the first file that gets executed when your program starts up. Okay. So figuring out the entry point is also important, so that if you find any error, and if the entry point itself doesn't work, you can kind of realize that something's wrong with the whole thing, not just your code. Okay. This is our entry point. So VS Code has a shortcut where you hold the control button, or if you hold the alt button, depending on your laptop, you can just click on the name and it will open the file for you. Okay. So what we did is we have a file called index.html that loads the entry point script called main.jsx. Now this script has really nothing inside it. Now you can see this is our JavaScript notation, right? Here's a function, here's another function, and here's a third function, right? And then what you notice here is the JSX notation. Okay. So now we'll be introducing the JSX concept, where you basically type HTML tags or tags that look like HTML tags, and then you can just create your elements in the web page. But then you might have noticed strict mode, app, all these are not real HTML elements, right? If I type this in a HTML file, they don't do anything. They just, remain empty. So that's where we are going to introduce the concept of a component. Okay. So component is basically anything in React JS that's basically an entire thing that you can render, but it's stored in a separate file. So a component is made of other tags, or a component can be made of other components. You can do it however you want. Or in a more general definition, a component is the smallest thing that you can display on that page, or like smallest meaningful unit of stuff in your page. So let's have a quick look at the existing project. You can see how there are multiple components. There is a component for the about page, which contains the code only for the about page, right? There's a component for the contact page, which contains only the stuff for the contact page. Similarly, if you just go through all of these, and then you see there's a file called app.jsx. In the app.jsx, the code basically imports all these components from the various files and then puts them right next to each other. So this is why creating components is useful, because you can split your code into multiple files. And let's say I want to put the skills right after the project. So I can simply delete this line, create a line above it, and just paste it here. So it was really that simple to change the order of my components which I display. So now that you're clear with the concept of a component, let's create our first component, okay? Or explore the components that's already there. So app is the component. You should never modify the main.jsx, because it just comes with the template and we don't really have to modify it. The convention is to open the app.jsx file. You can see that the path for it is here. or if you just hold the if you right click on a symbol and you click go to definition, it will always open the file where it is created. Okay, so let me repeat. If you find anything that you don't know where it is created, or any variable that you don't know where it was made, just right click on it and click go to definition. It's a really useful feature of VS Code. When you do that, you can see that there's a bunch of code here, right, for the React app. So we will be deleting all of this and we'll create our first component. Okay, and let me just get rid of all of this. This also, give it a second. Okay, so this is our app right now. What we're going to do is we're going to start coding our React project from the scratch, right? So main.tsx, JSX, you don't need to change it. But in app.jsx, we will start coding. So what if you notice here, we have to create a function which has the convention is to keep the same name as the name of the file. So here we have called it app, okay? And this app is like the entry point within the main. So if you see in the main, there is only one component that's created, right? And this component, if you notice, it's simply a function. So this is another point you can keep in mind. All components in React are basically functions for like the most of them. Okay, so app is a function that returns more JSX code and stuff like that. Okay, so now I'm going to basically, let's say I'm going to create a div element and I'm just going to give its content as hello. So now you might have noticed this last line is chilling in. So this is the import and export logic of JavaScript. So this is another concept which we will introduce now from JavaScript, which is very commonly used in React. And it's basically, you have multiple files, right? How do you tell your browser, or like how do you tell the tool that which file are you importing this from? So that is done with export and import. Just think of like, shipping logistics where you export certain products from one country and then you import, products from multiple countries into a single country, right? Let's say UAE is an importer of like a lot of like agricultural products from India and China and all this stuff, right? So this is how import and export works. So if you notice here, now this file has you can export multiple things from a file, okay? But in this case, we have a special keyword called default. So just keep this in mind. If you type export default followed by the name of the function that you want to export, this entire file will export only one function, and that is this one. And for most of the cases, export default is helpful because you want to keep only one component in a file, okay? And that is the agreed convention. So if you look at main, it basically, the import statement is import app. There is a variable name that you're using it here from, followed by the path of the file. Okay. Now, if you notice, main and app are located in the same folder. So they have used a single dot. But then if you don't know their path, for example, just open your quotes, type app, app dot, or just type /, and you can see the autocomplete for it appear. And if I click on it, I can just complete the full name and it has appeared. Okay. And in other words, it has done the autocomplete for you. So, and similarly, the ones at the top are also import statements. So this follows the same JavaScript logic. Okay. So let's just get this project displayed in the browser, right? So if you remember the command which we had run earlier, and if you reload the page, you can see how there is some text hello in the center of the page. But then this kind of looks weird, right? We never gave the background color. We still have some weird title at the top, and our text is appearing like in the dead center of the page. So if you just go back to the project, open both the CSS files, and you can notice that there have been some default colors and settings, but for now you can just delete all of that. Okay, just go to index.css, keep the first 3 lines because we added it, and then delete everything else. Okay, so app.css is empty, index.css has these 3 lines in it. Now when you check the page, it has already reloaded and your text is there. Okay, so let me just quickly summarize. We have basically app.jsx is the main file that you'll work on, and we have created a simple div here, and div is a standard HTML element, right? And you can just see how you are able to write HTML code within JavaScript. That is the special notation. And in it, I have put whatever content I want. Like let's say my name is MTC. And when I save the file, you can notice that the web browser is updated automatically. And if you check the terminal, you can see that it says HMR update, and it says the names of the files which have been updated recently, right? So every time I save a change, you can see how the message repeats. And if I change it again, you can just like kind of correlate. So I hope everyone's created a basic React app right now. So you can just give like a thumbs up reaction. Okay. Guys. And yeah, if you have any doubts, please mention in the chat. That's always there. So now let's create our first component. Okay. There is this assets folder, but I don't really care about it. So let me just delete it. Okay. And I'm deleting it because it makes our code look a bit easier. Okay. We'll be mostly creating files inside the source folder, and let's create a button, okay, that displays text in it and also contains a URL. So I'm going to create a folder in my source folder. Just right click, you'll see an option called new folder and call it components. Okay. And in it, I'll create a file called link button.jsx. Just note the file extension. Okay. JSX is the file extension you need to give. Only then the React notation will work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a simple component that wraps a button inside a anchor tag. So I'm going to create function link button, and in this I will basically say return. If you remember, return is the statement that gives the output, correct? So this function does nothing. All it does is just create the element and return it to the user, okay, or return it to whoever called the function. That's the notation with React. So I'm going to create an element here, or let's just call this greeting. Let's start with something simpler. I'm going to rename this file to say greeting, and this is going to print, and let's create a div, and I'm going to print hello mtc and a ref. You must have learned this HTML code in the previous sections. I mean, the previous sessions. So I have created a simple, function here that basically returns a div, and then it has some text in it, and then it has an like a link in it, and then it has some other more text for the link. Okay. Now, if you remember, I had to export this function so that I can, import it in my app. So I'll just type export default greeting. So once you do that, you can see that any errors will go away. And also when you go to app.jsx, I can kind of get rid of this, and I can just say that, return div. Now in this div, I'm going to put like my greeting component. So the feature with VS Code is that when you start typing the name of the component, it starts autocompleting it for you. So when I just click on it, you can see it has imported the component for you, right? And I can just create a tag like this. Or if you remember from the previous lectures, this is called a self-closing tag. We'll keep it simple. We are going to create a greeting component here, which has nothing in it, and it takes no inputs. And then, this is the contents of the component. Now, if you look at the web page, you can see that the content has appeared, and if I click on it, it takes me to the MTC homepage. Okay. Oh yeah. So now let's say I want to create like 10 of these greetings. So I can just copy paste this line like 10 times. And I think that's 10 lines. But yeah, so now when I reload the page, you can see how it has appeared 10 times as well. And all of these 10 ones have the link in them. I can click it to open the web page and all that stuff. So this is why components are useful, because you have just created like multiple copies of the same component, right? So this is a very basic introduction to components. You can always look more into this, but then this is how the JavaScript importing and exporting logic works. Okay. So now we are going to, pass inputs to the component. Let's say I want to put a different name here, right? I don't want to put MTC, but let's say I want to give it like your name or whatever. And I want to pass it as an argument from here. So I can say something, greeting name is equal to Srini, for example. And then maybe the second one has, MTC or something like that. Okay. And let's just put Peter for now. So if I want to, customize every single greeting, I have to write some way to, take an input on this function, right? But then if you look at the home page, I mean, the page, it still displays the same name. So what you can do here is there is a notation where you can just say name. I'm thinking, and yeah, let me just try it out. And you can see how the names are updated, right? So the first one says Srini, second one says MTC, third one says Peter. Now I will explain the syntax to you because it is quite new, because you haven't seen curly braces in this place, right? And this curly braces are, like haven't, like they usually appear a lot in the React code. And what it basically means is that this is the notation of a React function. So any arguments that you give to a React function, it's given as an object usually, and this is called a JavaScript object. Okay, that's a concept you can look up online. And basically, we are giving an object with a key called name. Okay, and this name is applied in the JSX code. So now, whatever is written within the HTML code, let's say you want to insert a JavaScript object here. Let's say I want to write 1 plus 2 here, right? Like I actually want to evaluate the value of 1 plus 2 and put, like, replace it with 3 here. So wherever you want to write a JavaScript expression, you have to write it within curly braces, as long as it is within the, JSX, like the HTML tag. So any JavaScript notation in the HTML tag will appear in curly braces. Now, if I look at the website, it will basically replace this with 3, and you can see that the number 3 has appeared here. Okay. And similarly, name is a variable. So I have taken name here. If I put it here, this is technically a JavaScript expression, correct? So what happens is the function takes an argument called name, and then it substitutes its value in this place in the HTML code, and then returns the whole thing as the output. So when I go back to my app, I can basically, and yeah, here also, whenever you want to give a value for the argument, you have to put it in curly braces. That is the only difference with HTML. But you can just see it, okay? It's not always required. It sometimes works without the curly braces as well. But if you get an error, for now, you can just wrap it in curly braces. So let me summarize. You have a component called greeting, which we just made it here. And this has a, simple few lines of code. It creates a div and then puts the name in this spot. And it accepts an input called name. Now, whenever I save this, and just ensure your wait command is still running in the terminal, and you can check the web page that it has updated. Okay. So this is components, and this is how you can pass a value to the component. Okay. So I think you can create much more components in the same fashion. And here you can see that a lot of components have been made in a similar sense, but then these don't take any inputs, right? They just directly render it. And also you can also apply styles here, like the Tailwind styles. So let's just say I want to wrap it in like a span. Okay. And I'm going to say class name. So one thing with React is that, in HTML, you would ideally type class is equal to something, right? If you look at the previous code. Yeah, okay. So if you look at the HTML code of the previous project, you would have seen that we have typed class is equal to something. But this is an exception in React, where you have to basically type the word class name, because the word class is a special JavaScript keyword. So you cannot really use the word class here. That's the only difference. If you want to use the CSS styles, or especially the Tailwind classes, you can just create an attribute like this on the span element or wherever you put it. Now let's just add some, colors, like let's say text for Excel. So this is a specific Tailwind class name that creates a font size of like 2.25 rem, which is 36 pixels, and some other stuff. So if I check the web page, you can see how this is at a larger size, and your link remains the default size. Okay, and this is how it looks like at 100% zoom. So this, so far we have created our first React Pro application, and I hope everyone's reached here so far. All right. So now that you know how components work, you can also similarly, add images to your project, and you can add more styles. So if you notice, React doesn't look beautiful when you start with. React is just, it's a bare bones thing that you have to like start writing your code, and you have to configure your stuff, like, to look very nice. So just because a website uses React doesn't mean it's always going to look good. So you have to use other tools like Tailwind CSS, or you can also use normal CSS to make like a good looking website. React just gives you the flexibility to add a lot of cool features that just makes the coding part of it much easier. So we will wrap up the session for today, and I think we've been a bit short on time, but I hope this extensive, I mean, well, this coverage on JavaScript basics and React basics has helped you for today. So we'll be open for doubts now, and we'll continue just building the portfolio in the next session, and also we'll take care of the deployment in the next session. Okay. So that's it for today, guys. Please drop your doubts in the chat, and a feedback form link will be sent to you soon. So you can fill it up and let me know how was the session, and or if any other topics you'd like to, you would want them to be covered in future sessions. And yes, guys, so all the documentation for this website is located, in the GitHub links that we have shared earlier. So you can always go through it and just have a look. Okay, so we have a question in the chat for useful keyboard shortcuts for VS Code. And that's a really great question because keyboard shortcuts really speed up your workflow, as you might have seen me doing. So I think I will like create a document in the repository, and I'll just add like some useful shortcuts in it. Okay. Or you can also look up some tutorials on YouTube, but I will also like the few shortcuts that I'm really using on a frequent basis. I'll just put them up in a document in the same repository. So at a later point of time, you can just check this docs folder. Okay. And I'll like put it up there. Okay. For now, there is a really useful shortcut called Control D, and that basically creates multiple cursors in the VS Code like editor. So let's say I want to select all the places where the word greeting is appearing, right? So if you just go to the selection menu, yeah, this selection menu has a lot of cool commands. You can always check them out. Okay. And this is the command that we're going to execute. It's called add next occurrence. So if you can see, whenever I press the Control D, hmm, no, okay. One second. There is an option, but okay, never mind. So yeah, basically, when let's say I select the word greeting and I press Control D, you can see that it has selected all the like every time the word the greeting appears, it gets selected. So I can then edit it to type whatever I want, and all the 6 places got updated simultaneously. So you can also like let's say I want to write something over here, right? There's also a feature where you can um, so if you hold your Alt button, you can always click at another spot, and this will place a cursor with the help of your mouse. So if the keyboard shortcut thing isn't your cup of tea, you can always use the, hold the Alt button and then just click with your mouse on the spot where you want to place the cursor. So let's say XYZ space before the name. So as you can see, I have typed this XYZ space at the start of all of these 3 lines, right? At the same time. So, and obviously if I look at the website, it will show the latest changes. Okay. So this is called multiple cursors, and there are so many shortcuts that come with multiple cursors. So the most useful one is basically when you have Control D, where you have to first select something that you already have, and then press the Control D button to select the next place where the same word occurs. Okay. And with this, you can see that I have selected all. If I just keep going, it starts from the top, and I have renamed the, like I have everywhere the word greeting appeared, I had renamed it to ASD. Okay. And similarly, if you just hold the Alt button and click with your mouse, you can place a cursor at whatever spot you want. Okay. And apart from this, there are a bunch of shortcuts, but then you can mostly just figure it out by going through the selection menu. So there are